I've been primarily interested in working with children to discover in which they learn and to discover a theory by which children learn, starting at the very earliest ages. Actually, I think one of the primary problems of education really takes place before the children get to school, in the preschool years. Many children arrive at the school years with very well-prepared backgrounds. They have acquired certain intellectual skills. They attend well. They will participate in activities, learning activities. They will participate with other children. But many other children arrive at the same age with none of these cognitive or intellectual skills. And for those children, learning is a very, very difficult process when they get to school. Now, our whole school system is actually built on the basis of what the child learns before he gets to school, which is incongruous, actually. Everything is built upon that, and the training of the child in those years depends primarily on the parent. Now, if the parent has been well-trained himself, or at least has had a normal training and normal background himself, then he may well be prepared to train his child in the same way. On the other hand, there are many, many parents who, because of deprivations in their own life, through one reason or another, are not prepared to give their children the same types of training that most middle-class parents are. And in such circumstances, the child may arrive at his school age years without an adequate background at all. He may have very severe deficits in the types of skills he has. He may have even developed highly inappropriate behaviors for learning in a school situation. And the fact is, we have had very little attention to these types of developmental problems, largely because this type of training is not systematically done. So no one has been concerned with those problems. It really is left to the responsibility of the parent to train the child in all the things that he has to have. And in fact, there's no advice that the parent can seek in solving some of those problems. So
how early how early can a parent begin training a child? How early have you begun training children?
I started with a child 2 years of age. Actually, I started working out some of these procedures with my own little girl who was 2 years old. And I've worked with 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, and 6-year-olds. And actually, I've worked with older children than that. But it's possible to train a child in many of these very intellectual skills at very, very young ages. I'm not saying that it's necessary to do so. For example, with my own little boy, that I think we'll have a chance to see a little later on, I have only started working with him recently, and he's now a little over 3 years of age. And the reason is that I found that in starting with my own little girl when she was 2 years of age, that I could do much more than I wanted to before she got to her school, got to school age. And it's not necessary to spend that amount of time. So with my little boy, I've started at 3 years of age.
Is there any advantage in starting that early? What can that do for a child, starting so early?
So we usually don't think about this. There are a vast repertoire of skills that a child has to acquire before he can successfully compete in a school situation. For example, you'll find that in a kindergarten circumstance, a great deal of the time that the teacher spends is simply to bring the child's attention under the control of her instructions. So practically a whole year long will be spent in getting all the children in the group, or as many as possible, to attend when the teacher says to attend, to look at the things that the teacher wants the child to look at, to not be engaged in uncontrolled activities when learning things are going on and so on. This is an intellectual repertoire that we don't usually think of. But if a child is severely deficient in attending to what the teacher says, following instructions, that is, of an adult and so on, the child will have a very difficult time when he gets to school. If a child has acquired the discrimination skills of looking at small visual stimuli, such as letters and numbers and so on, this will be a very important type of intellectual skill that will enable the child to learn an alphabet more readily, to learn to read more readily, and so on. If a child has learned to count objects by the time he gets to school, this will be very, very, very important in his learning arithmetic and his learning of mathematics. If a child has learned the sensory motor skills of writing letters and writing numbers by the time, this is very important. And there are vast differences that can occur between children in the extent to which they are prepared in this way. Let's take a middle-class child whose parent has purchased crayons for the child and coloring materials and writing chalk and boards and so on, and has instructed the child and showed the child how to hold the crayon and how to write and how to trace and how to copy and so on. This child will learn to write the alphabet in a markedly different way than a child who's had no access to anything of that sort. One child will spend maybe will spend a long period of time just getting used to the materials and just learning how to copy and learning how to trace. The other child, with the skills, is prepared to learn to write the alphabet immediately on getting to school. Now, those are vast differences between children. So what happens is a well-prepared child will come to school, he'll be successful, he'll immediately start learning the intellectual skills, the teacher's approval will be forthcoming for this, he will do well in competition with his playmates, and as a consequence will receive social reinforcement, social rewards for this. The parents will be happy with the child and with the child's progress, and he will receive a great deal of social encouragement that way. The child, on the other hand, who's at the other end of the distribution, will get none of those social rewards. His attention and participation in learning activities will be poor to begin with, and as a consequence of not getting the various types of rewards and reinforcement, he will progress at a slower rate, and his attention will get poor. It will extinguish, which is a technical term. The principle involved is if you don't reward a behavior or reinforce it, it will weaken and disappear. And the same thing is true for children in their learning. And that is, if a child does not have rewards for attending, for working, for participating, then those behaviors will weaken and disappear, and then the child will no longer participate in the learning activities. From that point on, it doesn't matter how long the child stays in the classroom. He will cease to learn. If a child can stay in a classroom for years, but if he doesn't pay attention to the stimuli that the teacher presents and doesn't participate and respond as he's supposed to, he won't learn. Actually, the fact of the matter is we do not at this time have research which will tell us what children are capable of learning. We don't know. We know that some children are retarded in learning, and we know also that children don't normally begin their learning until they're 6, 5 years old. But we haven't had in the past research which will tell us what can be done with various types of children. My own research shows very clearly that children are capable of learning very complex intellectual material at very early ages, and they're capable of doing this in a relatively standard manner. I mean, various types of children placed under good learning conditions learn well and learn rapidly, and this extends even to children that we would normally call mentally retarded. I have a study with mentally retarded children, and they appear to learn in a manner which is very similar. That is, when they're under good learning conditions. Very young children learn well, even though in the past we have said that they have very short attention spans and so on, and they can't learn complex material. This is not so when they're under a good learning circumstance and there is adequate motivation, when the motivational needs of the child are well met. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about this apparatus which I use and which we will see in demonstration a little later on. It's a general purpose apparatus which I've constructed to be as simple as possible and to have as many uses as possible in dealing with the preschool child. Now, first perhaps I could show you, this is a window in which visual stimuli can be shown. Letters, pictures, numbers, things of that sort. Actually, these can be placed upon 5x8 cards and are manipulable just manually. So, for example, the child will be shown a letter. When the child reads the letter or is told how to read the letter and makes the appropriate response, he will then be given a marble through this slot here. The marble falls into this receptacle here, and the child may then use this marble in any one of 5 ways when the apparatus is in full operation. The child can deposit the marble here, in which case he will receive a small trinket or an edible like a raisin or a peanut through the same chute. And it drops here, and then of course he has it again. Or the child may take that marble and deposit it over here in one of these tubes. Now there are 4 tubes and they hold differing numbers of marbles. If the child deposits the marble in this tube, when he has put 10 in there, that tube will be filled. He will then get the toy which he has previously selected. He will then receive that toy. It will have been hung here. When the tube is full, the child will receive that toy. Or the child could work for a toy which has a larger value. When he fills this tube, and it only takes 30 to fill that tube, he will receive the toy hung above it. This tube takes 80. This tube will hold 150 marbles. That actually demonstrates the apparatus. For the experimenter, on the other hand, there is a portion back here which holds all the things that he needs to work with. Here are the marbles, and the small edibles are back here, and the trinkets. And of course the cards, which are the stimuli and so on, can be presented in here. This will give you a full view now, I think, of the 4 tubes and the manner in which the toys can be hung above them. Come on, Peter.